Good afternoon. I want to first thank Kathy Gilbert and Josh Pritchett, I hope I'm saying that right, for allowing the Green Party Alliance at USF to host this wonderful event today. Our organization is truly honored and excited, especially given where we began, the current state of the world today, and given what events like today will mean in the future. I would also like to thank the members of the Tampa chapter of the Green Party who saw a young student passionate about politics and frustrated beyond measure with the current state of political affairs, and encouraged him to channel that into a student group on campus, which would later develop into the first student Green Party chapter in the state of Florida. I would also like to thank my members. If you guys could all please stand so everyone can see who you are. Without these individuals, yes, definitely. Without these individuals, along with a few who could not make it today, we would not have been able to accomplish the depth of activism and organization that we were able to get done this past semester. Lastly, I would like to thank Dr. Martin Schoenfeld, who agreed to sponsor our organization, and who, I would like to add, will be speaking at tomorrow's event at the Tampa Public Library. For those of you who do not know Dr. Schoenfeld, have not had one of his classes, or have not heard one of his lectures, I strongly encourage you to come out to tomorrow's lecture. Dr. Schoenfeld's in-depth analysis of the current environmental crisis is an art as well as an intellectual analysis that manages to focus on environmental struggle, not as a single issue, but one that encompasses a broad system of challenges ranging from culture to capitalism. So thank you again, Dr. Schoenfeld, for helping to allow our organization to exist and make a difference on campus and in our communities, even though I know he's not here today. I would like to begin today by addressing the role of student activism, or better yet, activism in general, where we began, what we hope to achieve, what we have observed, and where activism goes from here. When our organization first began, and some of my present members can attest to this, we had no official meeting room, no set time for meeting, and we only met every other week. We had about 10 registered members and 2 active members. Since then, we have managed to grow to 30 registered members and 6 regularly active officers, and the first ever on-campus leftist coalition, the Solidarity Alliance at USF, which consists of the Green Party Alliance at USF, Students for a Democratic Society Tampa, and St. Pete, United Students Against Sweatshops, Students for Justice in Palestine, and Asian Women Empowered. This coalition has served as an activist pooling network and information network that has allowed smaller and larger organizations to get their message heard by other student activist groups and to allow greater activist participation at these student group-sponsored events. While we are by no means as large as we'd like to be, Green Party Alliance or Solidarity Alliance, our numbers have grown and the leftist student contingent is stronger than ever. When we first began, our organization's first event was restoring a community garden in the Brandon area that had fallen apart, and with the help of a professor of mine and volunteers from the local publics, we were able to restore the garden, which will serve as a lab for stewardship in the community, allowing children with learning disabilities to contribute to the garden and see it grow. This was a great experience for our organization and taught us a great deal about our own community. However, we wanted to take our organization a step further. While the restoration and stewardship accomplished at our first event was a great experience, we did not feel that the USF simply needed another environmental organization that would pick up bottles on the beach, clean up the sides of roads, or throw away litter on campus. As many of you know, environmental degradation is no single issue. It is embedded in the same system that has plagued workers, minorities, and various other oppressed groups for going on centuries. This system, of course, is capitalism, and it was this realization within our organization that got us much closer to the actual Green Party platform and got us into the streets. Since this moment, we have participated in marchers centered on worker struggles, including the Fight for the 15 and the Coalition of Immokalee Workers, March for Fair Food Wages. We also participated in the United Students Against Sweatshops letter drop initiative to get USF to divest from the brutal VF Corporation, which subjects its factory workers abroad to deplorable working conditions and wages that terrorize their workers into submission. While I have just discussed some of our activism, much of which was organized by other organizations in some sense, or in some cases, we were just fortunate enough to participate in, I would like to now focus on where our organization goes from here. As many of you have likely heard in recent news, a growing movement is sweeping college campuses across the country. It has been praised by some universities and brutally suppressed by others, including one of our own state colleges, Florida State University, who now owes its very existence and funding to the Koch brothers. The movement I am referring to, of course, is divestment. This has been something that we figured would be adopted by a variety of organizations across the campus, or perhaps across the state of Florida, but this was not quite the case. If there's anything that we have learned in the past year from getting started, it's that if you want to get something done, you've got to do it yourself. And that's why what I'm currently holding is a letter addressed to Judy Ginshaft, the president of USF, along with a petition for USF students that calls for a total divestment from all fossil fuel use and investments on the USF campus by 2020. This will allow for our university to be in compliance with the sustainability of our planet, as well as potentially take us from the 7th ranked university in the country for environmental and green initiatives to number 1. Divestment will be no easy task. As many of you already know, it has been blocked heavily by deans across the country, along with their board of trustees and outside lobbying forces. I'll repeat that again, outside lobbying forces. Believe it or not, there's a strong contingent on our campuses that heavily influences our board of trustees. Let us also turn to other divestment initiatives that have already taken place on our campus in terms of the BDS movement, or boycott, divest, and sanction movement that has arisen centering around the settler colonial state of Israel. An initiative on our very own campus held by our comrades in SJP gathered 10,000 signatures, was blocked before even being heard by the USF Board of Trustees and student government. This initiative was simply asking for a divestment from products made by an apartheid regime committing nothing less than a genocide abroad. I bring this up to show that we are going against giants, and we will need not just student help, but the public's as well. While we believe our university takes environmental sustainability seriously, we are under no illusion that we will simply walk in with a divestment and be granted our every wish. But this is the nature of activism, and just like we didn't give up when we only had 2-person student organization, we will not quit on divestment. Finally, I would like to address the nature of the left and what we have seen in our activism and from speaking to people in other organizations. To begin, I would like to say that I truly envy the far right. This statement tends to gather some controversy, but perhaps once I expound upon this point further, it will make sense why I say this. Let's take a look at where the far right stands in this country today. When one thinks of the far right, we typically think of reactionary Republicans and their Tea Party movements, but to me it goes much deeper than that. I would say when one looks at the far right, do not think of their pawns or their politicians, look at them. Them being the plutocratic oligarchs from Wall Street to Walmart. These capitalist oligarchs are enemies in their separate boardrooms, let us make no mistake. They are competing for the largest shares of wealth in the country, and each wants to see the other fail. But where they succeed is the fact that they are one unifying mallet when it comes to crushing rebellions, smashing unions, decimating wages, and eviscerating workers' rights. All enemies, yet one unified force. On the left, however, I see many different groups, ranging from the Green Party to the Socialist Alternative to even further left organizations, all championing worker struggles, all unified under the premise of a more equitable system, all gathered around environmental liberation. Yet everywhere, the left is divided. Activists unable to come to the table with one another, activists putting self-interest above the struggle, activists lamenting in pseudo-narratives about other parties not being the right type of left. And so I can't help but ask myself sometimes, if the revolution came tomorrow, would half the people who consider themselves leftists today be a part of it, or would they simply stand across the street with the far right and join with them in dismantling its goals? These questions are what we as leftists must consider today, tomorrow, a year from now, and onward, as we make decisions on where we go from here. Thankfully, I am given hope by the students I have met in our organization and others who show empathy and willingness to come together with other like-minded groups for a common goal. And I hope that my younger voices here today can speak up and help express this willingness to come together and struggle and help achieve the total liberation of all that have been oppressed by the current system. For workers who have seen dismantling of their wages and livelihoods year after year and wonder how they are going to make ends meet. For students who have done everything they were told to do and then some, but have been bludgeoned by outrageous student loan debt. For the environment, which is being raped and pillaged by capitalist oligarchs whose only concern is shareholder wealth, leaving humanity as an expendable commodity in their grand profit ideology. For the LGBTQ community, who has until recently just been recognized as having rights by the pseudo-left Democratic Party, which continues the support of their systemic oppression under neoliberal extortionist policies. For African Americans, Chicanos, Native Americans, Asian Americans, and all other oppressed nationalities that have been used as scapegoats by a segregationist system fueled by privilege, capitalism, and enforced by the American police force. And lastly, for the Palestinian peoples and the whole of the Middle East, which has seen its land and peoples divided, stolen, degraded, murdered, and occupied for imperialist ventures, all to control resources. Now is undoubtedly the time for the Green Party and the left as a whole to usher in a new era of prosperity and equality, and to crush plutocratic capitalism and its hawkish counterpart, imperialism, before it annihilates what is left of the planet and its inhabitants. Thank you, and thank you again to the Green Party of Florida for allowing us, the Green Party Alliance at USF, to host this wonderful event today.